वाहेगुरु 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 वाहेगुरु.
So, Jasvirji, we're going to talk about symbology and its relationship with leadership. And first of all, let's have a look at some of these symbols that are very common for us in Sikhi. And first of all, the symbolism of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So the first image there, it's a statue of Maharaja Ranjit Singh that was erected in Lahore. And when we use the titles Singh and Kaur in our names, there's a sense of affinity. So when we talk about Maharaja Ranjit Singh, I feel a sense of affinity with him because my brothers are also called Singh. And so the thing about titles is that we feel a kind of kinship. And then the symbol in the middle, Ekonkar, the symbolic oneness. And then we've got the symbol of Bandi Chhod, where Guru Hargobind Singh Ji, he enabled 52 Rajas to escape, well, to be released from prison, holding on to his tailcoat, basically. So we have these three images, these symbols, and there's kinship, and there's oneness, and then there's, like with Guru Hargobind Singh Ji, these Rajas, they were Hindu Rajas, they weren't Sikhs, they weren't necessarily followers of him. So when we're talking about leadership, and we have this concept of kinship, where it's very easy to feel this natural instinct of relatedness with the other. And then we have the concept of oneness, where it can sometimes require more skill and practice to feel that we are related to those who may be quite diverse to us. So for you, symbolically, what do these symbols tell us about leadership, this kind of balance between kinship and oneness?
Such a beautiful question. And I love all three of these symbols. They're all very powerful and important in their own different ways. So I think with Maharaja Ranjit Singh, for me as an academic, there's a lot of things that I associate with that, which is great leadership, sovereignty, and just the righteousness of what unity can look like in action, because that was how he ruled when he was the Maharaja before the empire was taken down. And the bittersweet is how his tale ended. But there was never a sense of defeat despite the adversity. So I still think that there's a lot of power in what Maharaja Ranjit Singh represents. For the image of Bandi Chhod with Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji, this is expressing through action that all life and all people are of value and have dignity, and that is how they should be treated and upheld. When we fight for the rights of others as if those rights were our own, that is when we truly embody the values of what Ikonkar actually means, because often we disassociate with the action. We idealize or romanticize the imagery and the meaning behind it, and we lack the ability to implement this. And our gurus showed us what Ikonkar in action looks like when you are selfless, not self-serving. It's easy to self-preserve, especially how we're conditioned in this materialistic world, and say, I'm just going to look after myself. If I've been given an exit pass, I'm out of that door. Guru Hargobind Sahib did not need to do what they did, but they did it to make a point that injustice of any type, oppression of any type, abuse of any type is not acceptable if you practice the ethics of Ik-Oankar, of oneness, knowing that greatness and that godliness exists not only within you, within your environment, within all the people in this world and all the forms of life around you, those that you know and those that you do not know have that same dignity, same value, just as you do. And most importantly, this is the part that we often forget, where we're talking about ikonkar in practice, is recognizing that oneness, that godliness, and that greatness in somebody who has harmed us, upset us, or angered us. Because if we can't apply it in that moment, it's not truly present within us. And our gurus showed us how to activate this as a human behavior, even in the most difficult of situations. And ultimately, that's the aspiration of every person, of not just Sikh, of every human being, is to treat all life and all people with the highest level of respect, love, and dignity. And for me, that's everything that Ik Onkar represents. So I think these three symbols are very, very powerful individually and when you put them together.
And in the professional environment, sometimes we can find that being minorities, like we might be the only person in a professional environment who's called Kaur or who's called Singh, and then we find that it's more difficult to create trust with the other, although we think of them as being part of our oneness, but we are not seen to be part of their oneness. And so that's where the challenge is. It's like, because we have to learn to both trust and also to be trusted, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we live in a more complicated world because people are not willing to show compassion or act from compassion. And it is actually just that simple, because if in every single environment we engaged in, if we entered with compassion or curiosity even to question why that person is behaving that way, not in a patronizing or a cynical way, but out of a genuine curiosity, that is there something more going on? Maybe I could be helpful to this person. Maybe this person's not having a good day, or they've just received some bad news. That tiny extension of compassion can completely change what manifests in that situation. And it will also change your response in that situation as well. If we're talking about how differences were celebrated, then I think that Maharaja Ranjit Singh depicted that under his rule, like the whole idea of everything people are doing under diversity, inclusion, and equity. He lived it out. He showed us what it looks like as a working model, where people are celebrated for their uniqueness and for the qualities that they bring to the space, meaning that everybody was celebrated for their differences, and they were encouraged to know and learn about the differences of each other. And that's where we lack in work environments, that we may see the oneness in others, they may not see it in us. So there's a bridge that's broken and it needs to be built. And there's an onus on the individual. It doesn't mean we have to go out there trying to build bridges with every single stranger that you meet. I think that might be problematic somewhat. But knowing where it's healthy and where somebody is willing to learn or to exchange. So you're not there to school somebody about yourself, you're there to learn about them also. So I think really understanding how oneness is activated is important, that it is a mutual road, and leadership has a massive role to play in that. So whoever is, managing or supervising that space, if they're not encouraging active inclusion, then it won't happen. It can happen in small pockets in the employee circles, but beyond that, it won't really flourish in a way that is safe and comfortable for everybody in that work environment.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember about Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji is that he was invited to rule over Lahore, by the Muslims. He wasn't a king only for Sikhs. He wasn't a king only for Muslims. He was a king for the whole community, wasn't he? So he was the total kind of wonderful expression of, equality and diversity without it being labeled as such.
Absolutely. And equity also. He ensured that under his rule, every single person thrived and flourished. At that time, during his leadership, illiteracy did not exist, neither did poverty. And children were educated in government funded schools. And we're talking about the mid 1800s in India. And the level of educational quality that was offered in Lahore was far superior than anything that existed in the West or in any other part of the world. So we're talking about really advanced leadership. And I think it's only been in recent times that Maharaja Ranjit Singh has been accoladed as one of the greatest leaders of all time, which is ironic.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Let's talk about these next three symbols then. The symbolism of Langar and Seva, and Guru Gobind Singh Ji on the horse and the falcon, and Mai Pago. So here we're talking about transformation. The Langar was transformation of social order, because for the first time, Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, he allowed people, he didn't just allow, he advocated that people sit together and eat regardless of their social caste, which was a radical, defiant act. It really disrupted social order, because in those days, as you know, the higher castes would not eat with the lower castes, and yet he kind of like made it, he disciplined people to eat together using the same utensils. So that was a radical for an act of defiance. And then Guru Gobind Singh Ji, in his time, people from the so-called lower caste were not allowed to ride horses. Only the ruling classes, those in power, were allowed to ride horses. But his followers, regardless of their caste, rode horses. And you know, in some contexts, people from the lower caste, if they were seen riding on a horse, they would be punished for doing that. So that was a defiant, radical act that transformed social order. And then we have Mai Pago, you know, a woman who led 40 men into battle. So gender, you know, so it disrupted the social order regarding gender. So in terms of these symbolic acts, in terms of transforming the social order, in what way do you think we're using these symbols these days in contemporary society to continue to advocate equality, gender equality, you know, equality between different races and diverse human beings?
I think we're living in an interesting moment of time. We're seeing different pockets of people activate for social causes more so in the last year or the last year and a half than we have in the last decade. There have been a number of massive events that have gone on, which I think have brought people together to fight for the right causes. And the institution of Langar in itself was absolutely revolutionary, especially at the time when it was introduced, because hierarchy was such a prominent thing. To separate and have elitism was the way that a lot of people inflated their ego to feel like they were of some caliber. And what our gurus did was destroy that illusion in the mind and say that the ego is but a mere vessel, and it is not the beer and the knower or the doer, because in reality we are all the same. And to humble yourself, this is where a lot of people objected to what Langar and Pangat represented, to sit at the same level on the ground, not on like fancy tables and chairs, regardless of your status, your religious background, your caste, or whatever else you're bringing to that situation. You were stripped of all of that the moment you entered the Langar hall, and you are just a human, and you're breaking bread with another human. And that act is so powerful. Now people are learning about the art of gathering and how these sorts of contributions of being curious, being neutral, entering a space as if you're, you know, a blank sheet of paper, to go in and learn and exchange, essentially does the same thing that Langar and Pangat were born to do. And looking after the wellness, to have a free kitchen that serves all people and especially the people that are in need of being fed. This was something that really deeply showed who the sick people were and how they wanted to show up for others. It was not a free kitchen just for their own people, it was for all people. And that is how it is meant to be and how it should be. The image of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj on the horse, I think this is that call to action that you feel like if you're going to go to a protest, if you're going to, you know, put your name to a cause and speak for the voice of people who are being oppressed, you know, that power comes through this warrior, this Sant Sipahi image. And the sovereignty also is what causes you to stand up. It almost pulls your body into action, saying, I need to be there. I need to use my voice. I need to do the right thing, because what is happening is not correct. It is not just, whether we're raising our voices for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for all these other people who have been harmed, whether we're raising it for the injustices of people who have been harmed, like Sarah Everard, Mia Marcano, Sabina Nessa, it's the same thing. It's that call to action to say that all life is valuable, and we are here to stand with every person that is being harmed or oppressed or silenced or hurt. We are here to stand with you. And my Bago coming in on the horse broke the ideology at that time, again, so massively revolutionary, that women can't, women are not able, or they shouldn't. And it was not about that. She became the one that she was waiting for. She became the change that she wanted to see. And that is so powerful, to know that there are no restrictions of age, of gender, of class, of status, of situation, that where it comes to doing the right thing, regardless of whichever body or circumstances we may live in, we all have the power built within us to stand up for justice if we choose to, if we can strip ourselves of the self-serving ego and step into selflessness. We're able to show up in the right way to protect others from harm.
And these symbolically, there's a contrast. It's like the langar, we sit on the floor as equals with everyone. And then there's the horses. It's like, yes, and we can rise above our station, you know? And I mention that phrase, rise above your station, deliberately, because very often in the professional environment, we can arrive, and this is what the pandemic has exposed. It's like, in whether it's in the health industry or the education industry, we can rise to a particular point, and then above that, it's like, no, you can't rise above your station. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji taught us that, no, you know, each one of us can be a leader. Each one of us can rise above our station. My Bhagavad showed us that as well.
Absolutely. But that doesn't govern us. You know, we can live at every level untouched by the hierarchy, untouched by the power and the ego and the greed that comes with those stations. You know, later on in their life, Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj is sleeping in the jungles of Machiwara on the floor, out in the open, unaffected, still in his royal king-like state as a warrior and as a saint. And they carry that wherever they go. And that is the point, that you are who you are. What you wear and your circumstances do not change inherently who you are. So if you embody the values of compassion and of righteous leadership, those values, they will be present in any circumstance, in any environment that you engage in. And that was the whole principle of Sikhi, is to embody them and become them, not just idealize them, romanticize them, and talk about them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. So let's look at the symbolic, the symbolism in the fact that our gurus gave us Gurmukhi. Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guru Angad Dev Ji formalized Gurmukhi as a script, you know, which is an example of innovation. They created something that didn't previously exist. They reshaped the characters that existed in the Landa script to formalize a new script. So innovation, meeting the needs of the people. And as you said earlier, like, so many people became literate like such a huge percentage of the population became literate because it was very easy for them to become literate. It was made easy for them to become literate. Then we have the Nishan Sahib, which symbolically we have struggled, and wherever we are able to raise the Nishan Sahib, there's a sense of ownership that we've created a sacred space where we have the right to live in a way, to perform rituals, according to our own beliefs that we've struggled for. And the Khanda, a symbol of activism, that it's about the spiritual and the temporal kind of taking action, not the swords. Without the swords kind of are there to be used somehow to fight for justice or fight for whatever cause it is that we feel will enhance the lives of others. So for you, these symbols of innovation, ownership, or activism, you might interpret them in a different way, but in what way are we continuing to be innovative and to take ownership? What is it that we're proud of as Sikhs?
I'm not sure if you're going to like my answer. My background as an academic and as a researcher, I see the active destruction of the Gurmukhi language, the dilution into Punjabi, where a lot of people don't know the difference between the Penti Akhri of Gurmukhi and what Punjabi script is. They see it to be one and the same. And this is an active, an active process of destruction through senior bodies, because once you strip people away from their language, they're not left with much else. We see this happening with the Welsh people in the UK, where Scotland have reclaimed the capacity to legally teach the Scottish language across their country. This wasn't allowed because England was governing over them and was reducing the access to their own language. This has happened in Wales, and the Welsh people are fighting to reclaim their own language. We are seeing this in Punjab, where in the state of Punjab, the one situation which hasn't happened in any other state is that where the language should be Punjabi, where it was Punjabi, has now become Hindi. So Punjabi is being diluted there. So the innovation and connection to our strength at a time where these things were taught, we're currently standing in a moment where we have to dig and reach and work really hard to access them, because they are not being passed on and preserved in the way that they were meant to or intended to. And that lack of access will change how we connect with these values, with these symbols, and with these ideologies into the next generation and as we progress further. And although I appreciate the symbolism of the next two images that you have on here, the Nishan Sahib and then the Khanda, they looked different historically. They didn't look like this. The Nishan Sahib used to be blue, not orange. The symbol on the Nishan Sahib itself was not this that we call a Khanda now. This emerged during the years of colonization. Previous to that, you would have seen a Shamshir, which is a kirpan, a shield, and then a katar, which is a punch dagger. These were the symbols that were present on the Sikh Nishan Sahib or the Khalsa Nishan Sahib. That was our Nishani. This symbol, we've built an affiliation and an attachment with it because we've seen it far too much throughout our lifetimes, but it doesn't historically or authentically belong to us or date back to our gurus. Yes, we could look at it and say the two kirbans on the outside represent Miri and Piri. The chakkar represents the oneness, and then you've got the khanda in the middle, which is the double-edged sword. The khanda used to be a prominent symbol for Sikhs, as did Ik Onkar. A lot of Sikhs would wear the Ik Onkar symbol, in various different forms, and it would be on some of the Nishan Sahibs as well. So from the historical accuracy or correctness, those would be my feedbacks and my points there. But in terms of what they represent, yes, our connection with these images now are ways that we can connect with community, society, and in some situations with activism as well.
Yes, and yeah, because I was going to say that with Gurumukhi, what I was fascinated regarding Gurumukhi is that our gurus didn't use Hindi, they didn't use Sanskrit, well, Sanskrit, Hindi derived from Sanskrit, they didn't use Farsi, they didn't use Arabic, they created a new script. That's what fascinated me. That's why I call that an innovation, because they didn't use what already existed. They created something new.
Absolutely. So it was intended as a script and not a dialect, which is what differentiates it from Punjabi, because Punjabi was originally Shahmukhi. So this is why when we go to certain parts of Pakistan or we speak to Pakistani people, they speak Punjabi to us, right? For them, it's Shahmukhi, and they still write it in the original script. We, as Punjabis, adopted the Gurmukhi script, added on a few extra letters, and then called that Punjabi, which is where the confusion for many people comes with for Gurmukhi and Punjabi, because they see the similarities, they think it's the same thing, but you're 100% spot on that it was massively innovative to be so inclusive through action by creating something that accommodates all voices, all languages, and all cultures, because it was a combination of a variety of different dialects that gave birth to Gurmukhi.
Yes, and in terms of identity, it's creating a new identity as well, isn't it?
It is indeed, absolutely.
So in terms of leadership, we have, traits that we know are important in leadership, like empathy, altruism is important, courage obviously is important, compassion is important, confidence is important. So symbolically, we see these symbols all around us. Do you think that we kind of like can muster up, can generate these emotions using these symbols in a more active way?
Yes, if you have a connection to the symbols. And I think it depends on the levels that you're trying to make impact and activate leadership. And I keep coming back to that word activate, because that's often the place where we have that missing link. We don't know how to implement these things on the ground, or how to bring them into action and to embody them. So yes, everything that you've said is a part of key leadership. And we need different ways to make connections with them. But ultimately, if you haven't actually applied them individually in your own way of communicating with people, or showing up for people, then in that space of leadership, when you've got your leadership hat on, they won't come to you intuitively. You're going to have to dig for them, because they'll be at the bottom of your bag. But if you're using them on a day-to-day basis, and you're showing compassion, not just in your workspace to your team that you're working with, or to your employees, but outside of the workspace as well, it's about being a wholesome leader. And this is what I was saying about Guru Gobind Singh Ji, that they were not just a leader when they were addressing the people. They were not just a leader when they were sitting in the Guru Darbar. They were the leader when they were sleeping, when they were walking, when they were by themselves, when they were on the battlefield. They didn't talk it, they were it, by living those values of daya, of recognizing that everybody has value, everybody has dignity. And even those that have fallen off the path, through compassion and through love, can be brought back into inspiration to come and align with their higher calling, with their destiny, and to live a more fulfilled life through choice. So it's not disregarding people because they've fallen off the path and they've made a mistake. It's about, how do you help this person to improve their weakness, whether you're talking in a work environment, on the street, or in your personal life. The principle applies everywhere. And that, for me, is what true leadership is, that when you are that person in and out of the work environment, and there is a consistency in you as a human being. And that's a lot to ask of people these days, because it's much easier to wear the hat and take it off and say, this is just what I do at work, and now this is me outside of work. And I can be a horrible person if I want to be, because I'm not at work now. That's the difference between a really good leader and just somebody who's trying to earn a good paycheck.
I like the fact that you use the hat metaphor because, you know, I think Sikhs are encouraged not to wear hats, but to wear the dastar, because you don't just put it on your head. It's on a daily basis. You tie it anew every day. It's not something that you do once and then you think, right, I've tied my dastar and then the next day I can just put it back on. It's not like that, is it?
Absolutely not. Every day is like renewing those vows, because this is my crown. It's my connection with my guru and my claim to sovereignty, my Sant Sipahi power, everything, all of that is the blood that was shed in our history for us to have the ability to wear our articles of faith openly now without our lives being threatened or our faith being threatened, is such a luxury and such a privilege. So to not have that connection would be a shortcoming. But every day when you tie your dastar, when I tie my dastar, that's what it is. It's just renewing and reaffirming that commitment on how I choose to show up for myself and for others in every day.
And I suppose we have to be conscious of the fact that it's only a privilege for us in some spaces, right? There are still Sikhs in places where they don't have the privilege.
Absolutely. And there are still other faiths who don't have the privilege of being able to wear their articles of faith or their head coverings in public spaces. It's not safe for them. So you're absolutely right.
Okay, excellent, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jasvir. That's been a wonderful conversation. I've really learned a lot in speaking with you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh Ji. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you're welcome.
Wow.